Just walk us through exactly what happened last night and how much damage was sustained.
Well, it was an especially dramatic day and a very dramatic year. It began with a small-scale Israeli invasion of southern Lebanon and ended with this major Iranian missile salvo against Israel. Now, this was telegraphed well in advance. The United States issued a warning that it had indications the Iranians were preparing a ballistic missile launch. The Israelis didn't immediately confirm this, but they did issue a nationwide alert on citizens to remain closer to bomb shelters to avoid congregating in public. And then toward evening, with a few minutes warning, we had about half an hour, 40 minutes of a number of waves of these missiles coming in and being intercepted, mostly in the skies over Israel. Some appeared to have come through, especially in the desert areas of southern Israel. And I, in the Jerusalem area, had heard something in the order of 25 explosions overhead, suggestive of interceptions going on right there. It's worth remembering that Israel's air defense system includes an upper layer called Arrow that is designed to intercept incoming threats above atmosphere. So really, those would have been very, very high altitude interceptions. And the Israelis put out a nationwide alert, not just because of the incoming missiles, but because of the risk of debris being spread far and wide, potentially lethal debris. We're talking about large, heavy, hot chunks of metal. It was over within about 40 minutes, but it was definitely an unusual, almost unprecedented event. There was something similar on April 14th, but this one felt more intense, more sustained, and on a greater scale.
I'm not a weapons expert, but from what I've been reading, it seems as though the type of missiles that were used were a lot more potent. They were using ballistic missiles, not slow-moving missiles and drones. Dan, we had some comments from the Israeli Prime Minister yesterday saying, and this is a quote, "Iran made a big mistake tonight and it will pay for it." What form is the Israel response likely to take?
Well, as you know, there wasn't an explicit threat, but one might be able to read into that statement to which you're alluding. First of all, the Prime Minister threatened the Iranian regime specifically. Then he invoked the killing by Israel of Hezbollah and Hamas leaders in recent weeks. And perhaps intentionally, the video showed him sitting next to the director of Mossad, the Israeli Overseas Intelligence Agency, whom Iran has been blaming for the assassination on its turf in Tehran of a Hamas leader, Ismail Haniyeh. So there may have been messaging here that members of the Iranian leadership could be in Israel's gun sights, specifically when it comes to some sort of future covert action. Again, none of this was explicit. However, Israel is really past the stage now of empty rhetoric. This is a serious multi-front conflict. It's approaching its first anniversary. And I believe, given that statement by Israel, other Israeli leaders, Israel appears would have been committed itself to retaliation against Iran itself.
Yeah, similar to what we had back in April. Paul, let me turn to you. Dan was just referring to a multi-front conflict. And yesterday, while all this went on, of course, Israel had announced that it was launching these targeted ground raids in Lebanon. The ground incursion began in the southern part of the country. Airstrikes continuing overnight as well. What do we know about the latest developments in Lebanon?
Ajimana, you're right. The attack on Israel by Iran yesterday came less than 24 hours after the start of a ground incursion into southern Lebanon. We're still not hearing much information in terms of just how many Israeli troops are on the ground in Lebanon and how much weaponry they have there in terms of tanks and things. It does seem that so far the clashes have been fairly light. There haven't been reports of big casualties either among Israeli troops or among Hezbollah or Lebanese civilians so far. So it's a bit unclear exactly what is happening there, but it does seem like there are certainly troops on the ground. They're trying to destroy what they call Hezbollah's attack infrastructure and to continue degrading the group as they've been doing in the last several weeks.
Yeah. I was reading reports overnight that U.S. naval destroyers fired about a dozen interceptors during the Iranian attack on Israel. So U.S. aided Israel at intercepting some of the missiles that were being directed at Israel. What has the U.S. response been in the last 24 hours? Because on one hand, they've been pushing for de-escalation, but then, of course, stepped up last night to help Israel defend its territory.
Exactly. They did try and prevent Israel from sending troops into Lebanon, and I think they kind of grudgingly accepted it when it happened, hoping that Israel won't go very deep at all and that it will be quite a limited incursion. Yes, as you mentioned, some U.S. warships were involved in the interceptions. Differently from April, I think Israel and the U.S. and their allies were given much less time to prepare for this attack because it wasn't quite as choreographed by Iran. And as you mentioned, it used just ballistic missiles this time, which arrived much more quickly than things like drones. So it didn't seem to be the mass-scale operation that we saw last time, which saw the Jordanian, French, and UK air forces also involved.